Hey everybody, welcome back to channel Stu Clark. If you're new here, I am a professional wildlife photographer living here on beautiful Vancouver Island. This channel is devoted to everything nature photography, from everything from birds, animals, wildlife. We'll definitely touch on Lightroom, Photoshop, DaVinci Resolve, things like that. If that interests you, please consider subscribing. We're on my way to 5,000 subscribers, which is just awesome, and if you can help me get there, that'd be great. So in today's video, we are going to take a look at auto ISO. And auto ISO, anytime I've mentioned it in previous videos, you always get those people talking about how I only shoot in manual mode. You know, I can't leave anything up to the camera. The reality is that is, I think in many ways, oversimplifying it. Auto ISO, especially in current, any of the current mirrorless bodies, Nikon Z8, Canon R5 II, any of the Sonys, auto ISO, when you're shooting in manual mode, is an absolutely fantastic mode for wildlife. And a lot of times people say, well, I think because it has auto in the name, people kind of assume that it's more for beginners. I think it's far more nuanced than that, and also I think it's far from reality. Auto ISO enables you to react so much faster, and it's going to allow you to get the shot. So let's kind of back up a little bit and we'll kind of take a look at what we're talking about. When you're shooting in manual mode with auto ISO, you've got control of the shutter speed, the aperture, and the camera controls the ISO. We're talking about this from a wildlife photography standpoint. This is not for landscape photography. This is not for macro photography. Auto ISO specifically when being used for wildlife photography and bird photography. With aperture, that's something you're going to change a couple of times a day probably. Generally, you're going to shoot at f8, and that's going to provide you enough depth of field to cover your subject. And then as the light starts to dwindle later in the day, you're going to open up your aperture. You're going to shoot at f5.6, you're going to shoot at f4, up to 2.8 if that's what your lens will allow you to shoot. And basically as the day progresses, you're going to open your aperture up, and that enables you to keep your shutter speed high enough to capture your subject and the ISO low enough to get decent image quality. Now, shutter speed is obviously, that's the one variable as a wildlife photographer that you are in constant control and constantly changing. So with shutter speed, there's two main factors that come into play with shutter speed. One is how fast is your subject moving, and two, how much movement is being induced by you holding the camera. So if you shoot on a tripod, obviously you can shoot lower shutter speed. You can drop your shutter speed right down because you're shooting on a tripod. But that still doesn't take into account how fast is your subject moving. So your subject at the end of the day will be the number one factor that determines how fast a shutter speed you need. So when you're shooting birds and wildlife, one of the big issues is, when people talk about I only want to shoot in manual mode. And I bet you if you ask them what sort of situations do they typically shoot in. I know in one I posted on a video a while ago, and somebody said, I'm in South Africa and we only shoot in manual mode here. They're also shooting oftentimes from a vehicle. They've got a subject out in front of them that, it'd be a leopard or a lion or an elephant or something like that, sitting in a fairly fixed position, both them and their subjects. And in those situations, yes, manual mode works just fine. But you can imagine if you're out going for a hike and you've got an eagle that flies in from the left and then flies across your field of view and flies into the trees behind you to chase a duck. The reality of it is, from this point of view to over here, as it basically flies across the sky, the changing of the exposure from, say, bright blue sky to dark green trees is so dramatic that you would be hard pressed to change the ISO as that bird is traversing the sky. So this is one of those situations where letting your camera manually do it makes sense. And when people are shooting in manual mode, one of the things that they're often doing is they are using the metering. So as much as they like to claim that they want to manually shoot, the reality of it is they're still using the meter of the camera which is an automatic meter. It's not like, they're not using a light meter to try and determine their ISO as they're photographing these subjects. They're still relying on the meter within the camera. So because you're basically relying on that meter, and then you're trying to change it as the scene changes, as opposed to just letting your camera take control of it, and it will change the ISO as it needs in order to maintain that shutter speed that you have predetermined based on the speed of your subject, based on your subject matter. So it's one of those features that it's become so good. Higher ISO has become so much better. The software you use to denoise those higher ISOs has gotten so much better that you've got so much more latitude than 10 years ago when it comes to shooting a high ISO. For me, manual mode with auto ISO just absolutely makes sense. It takes a big part of that decision making away from you. So you're basically, all you're going out, you're setting your aperture based on the depth of field and essentially available light. So like I say, you'll shoot f8 when you've got lots of light. As the light starts dwindling, you're going to open up your lens. You open up your aperture, you're going to open up the lens to make it as fast as possible, so that your only decision making as you're trying to photograph your subject is, do I have enough shutter speed to capture this bird, this animal, this bear running? Give a good example of that would be, you've got a bear coming out of the forest. You imagine it comes wandering out of the forest. If it's walking slow, 1/250th of a second can be more than enough. So you can turn your shutter speed to 1/250th. That'll be enough to get it as it's wandering out of the woods. That'll keep your ISO as low as possible. So you are controlling your ISO by adjusting the shutter speed so that you're just fast enough to capture your subject. And that way you're going to ensure that that ISO is kept as low as possible. Then if it sees a salmon and starts to run, all you have to do is turn your back dial. That'll increase your shutter speed. You can turn your shutter speed up to 1/1000th. The camera will adjust the ISO accordingly, and you will then have enough shutter speed. The camera will adjust the ISO so your exposure is correct, and you're able to capture that bear as it's chasing salmon down the river. And it's so nice. It makes so much sense. It's such an amazing way of setting your camera up. And they say, and a lot of times I think because it has auto in the name, a lot of the old timers think, oh, I don't shoot auto anything. I want to take control of everything. Well, you still are taking control here, because just because you let the camera determine the ISO, but if you're correctly adjusting the shutter speed so that it's just fast enough to capture your subject, you are keeping the ISO as low as it possibly can be, that you still have enough shutter speed. A lot of times when people are talking about this, and I learned this a long time ago with certain aspects of photography, how people shoot, what they shoot, plays a big part in how they set up their camera. If you followed any of my videos on setting up the Nikon Z8, I've had a few people commenting on, can you email me the file so I can just download it and put it in the camera? And yes, I can. If you want one, sure, I can send me an email. I'm happy to send you an email of the file. The problem is, so many things have been adjusted or changed in the camera that it's set up for me, maybe not for you. And it's very much, by giving the way I did these videos, I'm hoping that you can get a good understanding of why I set things up the way they did, so then you might be able to make adjustments to how you want to shoot. So as much as, yes, I'll happily send you the file if you want it. I highly encourage you to really sit down and go through all of the settings in the camera and start working through it, so that you get a much better understanding. It's like, oh, why did you make that change? I actually prefer to shoot it this way. And that way you make the changes that are right for you and your shooting. And you say an auto ISO for me works great. Landscape photography, no, it doesn't matter. You don't want it there, because that's a case where you want full control. Because you're often shooting on a tripod, you can let the shutter speed go lower than you can handhold it in order to keep your ISO as low as possible. In landscape photography, the speed of your subject rarely plays into the shutter speed needed, unless, of course, you're dealing with moving water, or clouds moving. And that'd be two situations where, sure, you do need to have a minimum shutter speed to capture that. But so often, if you're dealing with still environments, you can have your shutter speed go much lower, then you can handhold it so that's not playing in. So you want your ISO as low as possible. So yes, you'll take full control of the camera for landscape photography, for a lot of different styles of photography. But you're dealing with fast subjects, fast action where things can happen quick. By having it where you are only really needing to worry about your shutter speed, so you can walk around at 1/1000 shutter speed, everything else is set. You're ready to go. You can shoot whatever. And then if you got a still subject, you can turn your shutter speed right down to maximize, keep your ISO as low as possible to get the maximum image quality, or you can turn it up as needed. So there's kind of a quick take on auto ISO. I think it's an amazing way to shoot nowadays, and I highly encourage you, if you haven't been using it, definitely try it out. And like I say, if you have any of the newer cameras, I think it's definitely the way to go, and it really helps, makes for a really easy setup, and I highly encourage you to give it a shot. Hope that helps. Till next time, we'll see you out there. Take care.